Coming to you live from Radio Cayman Studio.
For the record.
For the record. Hear from your government officials, independents, and the opposition on issues that matter to you. The record. Engage in an open dialogue between residents and lawmakers.
For the record.
The record. Informative, impartial, insightful.
This is your talk show.
1-800-534-8255. Your calls, your input. This is For the Record. And now, your host, Orit Connor.
Good morning and welcome to For the Record. Whether you're here in the Cayman Islands listening or if you're listening overseas via the web and or streaming, audio is up and working well. We know some persons had difficulties hearing or receiving or streaming audio, while in our studio here, as well as other places, people were able to get it. Some others were experiencing difficulties, and we hope now that those difficulties are over. So whether or not you're listening here in the Cayman Islands or overseas via the web, we want to welcome you to For the Record this Friday morning. Looks like we're going to get some weather coming in. I see some clouds to the south and to the southwest of us. If it means rain, we can certainly use some of the rain now, so we look forward to that as well. Of course, you're listening to For the Record, a show that has been produced by the staff and management of Radio Cayman, and For the Record is geared specifically for you, to keep you abreast of issues as they arise and play out on the local, regional, and international scene. I am your host, Orit Connor. Some call me OC, some call me other names, but those we won't mention on the radio. And I am extremely thankful that you have chosen to join me on For the Record, where the show is brought to you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 7:30 a.m. until 9:30 a.m. We have a toll-free number, courtesy of Lime, which facilitates your efforts to reach us and to talk with us. That toll-free number is 1-800-534-8255. We also have two landlines, 949-8037 and 949-6990. And of course, as I always say, if you don't like to talk on the telephone, then you can email us at fortherecord. That is one word, fortherecord at candw.ky. Kandawaki, they call it. candw.ky. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, and you all know, today is Friday, and we have two gentlemen who are becoming regulars on Fridays now, and I think they will be regulars for a while until the official opposition comes on. They are always at my beckon whenever I contact them to say, I'm going to need you on the show this morning. Those two gentlemen are prominent local attorney, Mr. Alan Steve McPhail, and we have local CPA, soon to be prominent, Mr. Christopher Saunders. Gentlemen, good morning and welcome back to For the Record on your regular Fridays.
Good morning, Mr. For the Record, OC. And it's always good to get your call on Thursday. I sort of look forward to it now to get your call.
I don't want to disappoint you.
Yeah, so it's all and to co-host your show with my colleague Chris Saunders. In fact, I as they say colloquially, I back up into him last night. Yes.
We started.
Yes, as he was visiting his mother. You know, his family lives across the street from me.
Right.
And so, you know, we had a good talk. I don't talk to him so much off the record because sometimes I don't see him. So it was good to see you, Chris. Yes.
Likewise.
Yes.
Good morning, Ocean. Good morning,
Chris.
Cayman. And it's, yes, as Steve said, we did buck up into each other last night. And it was actually a pretty good conversation. I wish we had actually recorded that one because it was candid, straightforward. and everything else. But it was actually pretty good, and I'm very happy to be here.
Okay, and I think our listening audience, the feedback that I get from it, they certainly enjoy the Friday show like they do all segments of For the Record, but in particular they enjoy Friday because it brings a different, flavor, to it. I was talking to someone this morning and they said the government is on Mondays and they bring their issues to the table. We have the independent members on Wednesday, and they bring their issues to the table and critique some of the issues that are taking place in the Cayman Islands. And then on Fridays, then you guys just rip into everything
Well, actually,
that has happened.
I can tell you what.
Before.
Well, one way of looking at it is the government tells you what they're doing on Monday. The other guys more, I guess, looking at a different view on Wednesday. But I think on Friday, at least for me, what it is I would like to think that we're doing is looking at a different way or a better way.
Yeah.
Because ultimately within our democratic system, I mean, the freedom of the press, the freedom of voice, the freedom of expression is tantamount to a success in any democracy. And it's important for people to realize that when we come here and we critique the government or, we say, maybe they should consider this, it is part of our democratic process. I mean, iron sharpen iron.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the resources that they have, ours are limited, but at the end of the day, we must want to make sure that we're keeping them honest.
Yeah, and that freedom of expression extends even to Barefoot Man in terms of his cartoons and everything. But that freedom of expression, when it is used to damage people, to demean people, and to hurt people, that is when it is not condoned. Of course, what we like to do on Fridays as well is to look at issues, not, like I said, not only issues that are occurring in the Cayman Islands, but elsewhere. And some of the things that we want to look at this morning, for instance, we see where the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service has launched a second recruitment drive. We want to talk about that. We want to see how we can encourage Caymanians to join the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service. If you complain about the fact that you're having to deal with officers who cannot identify with our cultural norms here in the Cayman Islands, and whereas they may give others a break, they're not giving Caymanians a break. And not that we're saying that we want Caymanians in the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service to do anything illegal to help, a Caymanian, but at least someone you can identify with, a voice, an accent that you can actually understand. That will be a good thing. We want to also look at the United Kingdom, and I mentioned this to Mr. McField yesterday. I can't remember if I mentioned it to you, Chris, but we want to talk about there was a ruling by the Supreme Court in the United Kingdom. And for those of you who may be surprised when I say Supreme Court, there is a Supreme Court in the United Kingdom because, as you know, the Privy Council is going to be phased out. But I'll let Mr. McField talk about that, and explain to our listening audience the difference between the Supreme Court and the Privy Council. But there was a ruling in relation to the correspondence between Prince Charles and UK ministers, in particular during the Blair administration. And the Guardian newspaper made a request. I think it might have been either 5 or 10 years ago, 10 years ago, 2005, and this was being fought through the courts to get access to those letters, and eventually the Supreme Court ruled that yes, that they must be released because Prince Charles was advocating for certain policies and stuff like that, a lot having to do with the environment. And since then, they have changed the freedom of information laws in the United Kingdom to make some of his correspondence exempt. We want to look at that, and we want to see how that compares to the tempura FY request here, and whether or not it is possible for us to craft legislation here that will allow access to those tempura records, at the end of the day. I also want to talk, we spoke yesterday about the alarming situation in Trinidad, in the Trinidadian Parliament. I mentioned on For the Record here several times the fact that an unusual occurrence had taken place where the government, the ruling party, actually brought a vote of a motion of no confidence in their parliament against the leader of the opposition, Dr. Keith Rowley. And we see some disturbing debates that took place in their parliament that has created a real sandstorm in Trinidad in relation to that. So we want to talk about that as well. And of course, we want to talk about some local issues, anything that you gentlemen want to put on the table, as well. We have about 5 minutes before we go to the break. So let's start with the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service and their recruitment drive and look at the fact and how can we encourage Caymanians, young, those who are at age to join the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service to make a difference in your community, to make a difference in terms of how people feel that they're being treated by the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service. Mr. McFreel, you normally interact with the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service. Chris and I probably less. I haven't had a ticket in a long time. Yes. My last interaction with them was one driving to work early in the morning and tailgating me all the way down, driving dangerously. But let's start with you, Mr. McFreel.
Well, I guess I can say without fair contradiction that this demonstrates the influence that your show has on public and with the public, because you had been advocating for weeks and months about the desire to get Caymanians in the police force, and being sort of have finally gotten it, that you cannot have a foreign force in a indigenous country where they are looked at and they are assumed to be what we call foreigners. Because one of the things of policing is that you have to know the people that you're policing. You have to have some historical, psychological, or community interests with them. And if you don't have that, then they are not going to tell you anything. I mean, I told the story, I think, several times on this show. I don't know if I did it on this show, but on another show. It's about the African author Achebe. He wrote
Chinua Achebe.
Yes, right.
Yep.
He writes
Things Fall Apart.
Things Fall Apart. One man, one vote. One man, one machete. And he tells a story about Kenya, about a English chief of police when Kenya was a colony, and he had gone to this village to find that one of the people that the guy he was looking for had hung himself in his hut, and all of the villagers had fled into the forests. And when he was writing his memoirs in England after he had Kenya became independent, he was saying that of all his stay in Kenya, that was the first time that he discovered that those villagers were scared of people who had committed suicide, who had hung himself. But that was not the real story. The story was that this particular man who had hung himself in his hut was always the protagonist. Everything happened in the village, the chief of police would arrest him. And he was like and there was just exclusion of the villagers from the decision making of the police. And he never asked people, well, can you give me some tips or something about, do you think this guy did it or whatever? And so when this guy finally hung himself and says, I've had enough of this antagonism by the commissioner of police. And when the commissioner of police came into the village, the people went into the bush and hid themselves. And why they did it? Because they said it was the chief of police that caused the death of the man who hung himself, and he should cut him down himself from the place where he hung himself. And the chief of police interpreted the other way and said that they were scared of people who had committed suicide, hung themselves. Mm-hmm. So the moral of that story is You have to know people. And I have always been advocating that if you want to have good policing, if you want to have effective policing, you have to go back to the original type of policing, neighborhood policing. You have to have people walking the beat. I have talked about this so many times. And I have said so many times, for instance, I remember when I was a young boy, 12, 13, 14 years old, going to school, and I would stop over and play marbles with my friends. And my mother would say, you know something, boy? When Earl would pass here, I'm going to tell him that you're not coming home till 2 and 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Earl would take beat was from the old police station, which is right down the street from us, and he would walk down Elgin Avenue and up Shaden Road, and then the town had stopped at Conlem Wells, which is now the old block factory, and then he would come down Mary Street, and then he would come down, he would go through Rock Hole, and then he would come down to Churchill Street and walk down what's now Harbor Drive and go back to Elgin Avenue. And you didn't want your parents to tell Earl Wood or Dudley or any of those people that you were a bad person.
Okay, folks, I want to remind you that you're listening to For the Record. I'm your host, Dorrit Connor. My guest in the studio with me this morning, we have Mr. Alan Steve McField, prominent local attorney, and Mr. Christopher Saunders, certified public accountant, political activist, political pundit, part-time domino player. Please stay tuned. We'll be back shortly. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. I'm your host, Dorrit Connor. My guests in the studio with me this morning, Mr. A. Steve McField and Mr. Christopher Saunders. We started out this morning by talking about the launch that the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service has made in terms of recruitment, their second recruitment drive. Ms. Susan, I just want to say to you, if you hear me clicking my pen this morning, I've deliberately taken it out of my hand. If you hear me clicking it, bring it to my attention, please, because one of our listeners, or lawyer listeners, on Wednesday morning sent me an email saying I can hear the clicking of the pen in the background. Of course, he probably didn't know who was doing the clicking, but he said I can hear the clicking in the background. A few other things as well that I'll have to talk to my other guests, when we're on the show again on Wednesday. But I'm very thankful to our listening audience when they bring things to our attention, because this show is for them, and it is, they listen to it because they want to hear things, and we have to make sure that they are happy with what goes on in the studio itself. So extremely thankful, not upset that, someone has, brought it to my attention. You have to be able to accept criticism, especially when it is constructive. So I want to thank that listener, for that as well. Chris, we're talking about recruitment. Of course, one of the things that we've heard in the past was that the salaries offered in the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service are not attractive, in particular to college graduates and everything else. When we look at experience in the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service, we see in some other jurisdictions where their nationals may have worked in other police services, either in the United Kingdom or in the United States, even though there are those who would say policing in the United States is different than policing in the United Kingdom, or because the laws are different. I would not necessarily agree with the fact that someone working in one jurisdiction can't be a police officer in another. When we look, for instance, at one time, the UK, for instance, was considering Bill Bratton as the Met Chief.
That's right.
And,
Yep.
I think he even had an interview with them and everything else. But again, what can we do to encourage young people to let them understand that in order for us to have succession planning, in order for us to get someone in the top of the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service, that you need to get in at some level, despite the fact that there may be some pushback from the United Kingdom, because there are certain areas, of governance in the Cayman Islands that they will want to control.
I think first of all, we'll see, and I'm kind of glad to see finally that the Royal Cayman Islands Police is actually pushing to get more locals involved. We need to remember that we did have a local Caymanian police, Bragg's
Yes.
commissioner before.
Yes.
And to some extent, and it's a little bit disappointing that Braggs did not get the support that he could have gotten or he should have gotten from or local legislators at the time. And I think that in itself is a little bit sad. For whatever reason, I mean, right now, to some extent, we have seen other commissioners literally almost receive a blank check in terms of what it is that they want to do. Firstly, I don't believe salary is just the main reason. A lot of people who joined the force that have left, some of them some good friends of mine, and they have their own criticism in terms of the management. So it makes no use, one, if you're going to bring in local policemen and not listen to them. So it is important not just to have numbers for the sake of having numbers, but at a minimum, Baines needs just to make sure that he listens. The next issue in terms of even the first responders' uniform scale, I mean, we need to also factor in the firemen. I mean, I can't understand why, just the police alone at this point is being considered for a raise of pay, when in fact you do have other guys that are doing a lot of emergency work in the middle of the night and everything else, and I think that is something that needs to be looked at. I mean, what the firemen are receiving right now, and I know the salaries of some of them and their families to feed, it is actually quite low, and that also needs to be looked at. But unfortunately, for whatever reason, that doesn't seem to be a priority by some people. What I would like to ask the police OC to really look at, several months ago we had one fatal accident in Bordentown. It shut down the entire eastern districts. A few days ago we had again another unfortunate accident, which is quite sad, that involved a family. But again, for about 3 hours, traffic again was shut down, and we cannot expect to realistically have a situation where we do have traffic accident shut down our entire half of the island. And my entire time in that traffic, barring passing a police at the traffic scene, there was no traffic management anywhere else that I've seen. And this is really poor when, people have families, kids need to go and do homework and all that kind of stuff. And God forbid somebody even have to try to get to work where they're hourly paid. Losing 3 hours, in an hourly paid job is just too much to be stuck in traffic. And I know one of the things that we had touched on briefly was even just the overall development is that we keep importing people, we keep growing our population, we keep expanding, but there is no planning in terms of the proper infrastructure, in terms of what needs to be in place. And those are stuff that needs to be, but kudos to the police for at least making this initiative.
Sure. We have one caller online, so Ms. Susan, we're going to take that caller now. Caller, good morning and welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, Mr. Doris. How are you doing?
I'm fine. Good morning. How are you?
Yep, I'm fine. Mr. Chris, how are you doing?
Morning, my brother. You good?
Yep. Do you have anyone else in studio with you?
Mr. Markfield, Mr. Steve Markfield.
And Mr. Markfield, good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning to you, sir.
Yes, sir. I was reading the Cayman Reporter this morning, and I was thinking in 2013, they had a lot of Caymanians applied, for joining the police force, and there was only 15 selected out of them. And I'm thinking that now this is the second launch. Would they be looking after some of those that had applied from 2013, or they just shred them and they want new recruits? Because that's something very dear to my heart, because for years I was a policeman here, as you guys know.
Mm-hmm.
When we had a nice traffic department, and listening to Chris talking about the problem with an accident. When I was a police officer, the first thing we would do, because I worked in the traffic department for a long time too, is that we would take our spray paint, and the first thing we get to the scene, one of the officers, we would look after the injured very quickly. But what we would do, we would take a quick sketch, one of us, but then we would mark the road where the tires were of the vehicles, and we would clear the traffic, that we never had held up with traffic for hours and hours. Probably 20 minutes or half an hour would be the maximum time. But I don't know if the police officers do any sketch to these accidents now when they go to the scene, because I see a lot of police officers sometimes on the scene of these accidents, but I don't see them be doing nothing. So I'm just wondering, that's the easiest way to do. You take your spray paint and you mark where the tires was of the impact of the accident, motor vehicles, do a sketch plan, and then you can do your investigation after that. But as I said earlier, with the Cayman reporter, they're asking now for new recruits, probably 15. It looks like, I think the paper says somewhere around 15. But it was a lot in 2013. Why don't they take some of them and pick some of them out and use them instead of getting a whole batch of more applicants than you need, and you go only take 15 out of them? And I probably think some of them that was in 2013 have passed.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion, caller. I would imagine that, or we would hope that those that were not selected on the first recruitment drive would have been told the reasons for their not being selected, and if there were issues that could be corrected, that correction could take place, and that they could be reconsidered again. That would certainly make sense. Yes, they are seeking to recruit between 12 and 15 men and women to be trained as constables. When you look at the photograph on the front page of the Cayman Reporter, I am not sure it's showing some of the top brass in the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service, and they had two PCs there as well. I'm not sure whether or not they were trying to highlight the diversity of the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service, but this photograph doesn't necessarily show the diversity that is needed in the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service. We are now, a multicultural, multinational country, and that needs to also be reflected in the composition of our Royal Cayman Islands Police Service as well. But caller, I want to thank you for your observations and encourage you to continue to listen to For the Records. It is now 1 minute before 8 o'clock. We're going to go to a time check and then the news, and after that, For the Record will be back immediately after the news. Please stay tuned. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record, where we have in the studio this morning with us Mr. A. Steve McField, prominent local attorney, and Mr. Christopher Saunders, political activist, political pundit, and certified public accountant. Before we go to discuss the Supreme Court's decision in the United Kingdom in relation to this Freedom of Information request, Mr. McField, yesterday I was over at the hospital, the Health Services Authority, and saw a good friend of yours, good friend of mine, and good friend of lots of people on the island, Mr. Niels Godfrey.
Yes.
So we were talking for a few minutes. A couple of things we were talking about. He was lamenting the fact that I think maybe one of the local newspapers or something were talking about this great Caymanian pastime, great Caymanian tradition of picnicking, but he pointed out, and correctly so, that picnicking in the Cayman Islands way back didn't involve being out there on Good Friday and Easter Sunday and, overnight and stuff like that, because Good Friday was seen as a sacred day in the Cayman Islands. When we had a picnic, it was on Easter Monday, when we got Miss Dolly Ebanks and Miss Frances Ramon, when they had the picnics up at Spots Beach. And that's when we say talk about Spots Beach. Now we're talking about the one at the cemetery there, where they now have a small public beach as well. But it wasn't a Cayman tradition to camp, for the whole weekend, and we see people taking television sets and all sorts of stuff there. That is, he correctly pointed out that is not an old Caymanian tradition, and there may be some people out there who may disagree with that, and maybe in your districts it might have been something different, but I'm talking about the 60s and the 50s
and the 40s.
Yes. The other thing that he mentioned, and I'll give you an opportunity to comment on both of them, we were talking, he had been listening to the shows that we had previously when we had Captain Paul on and we had you on and we had Mr. Ivan Farrington on and we were talking about different things and we were talking about my chats with Miss Ardis Smith and how copper boilers came to get its name, and then he was asking me if I knew how Moringatong came to get its name and how Rock Hole came to get its name. And he said that Rock Hole, for instance, that the same property his family owns there now where the new school was going to be built, and it is partially filled in and stuff. There was a natural well that was there, and people used to, it was one of those walk wells that you could basically walk down into,
yes.
and people used to use, when they burnt stuff, they would take the ashes and throw it down in the well because it had the moss and to purify, but also to use it to wash their clothes and stuff like that. And that was done. And he said when this property was sold, he asked them to try to preserve that. And that was the first thing that they filled in, was that well. So I said to him, well, that area down there, that's where we're in the evenings, that's where we play dominoes and stuff. Can you come by one evening and see if we can, if you know where it is located, and maybe we can get them to excavate it and dig it back out and preserve, because those are the natural things that we need to have in Cayman. Then he was talking about Moringa Town, and you remember Marfield and Hensdale Chalet. I think we call them Little One and Big A, right? Chalet. And they had where Miss Joyce Prendergast's house was eventually.
Yes.
That was unfinished at the time, and they had a club there called Blueberry
Hill,
Hill.
that's right.
And when those guys came back from sea, everybody had a brand new bicycle with streamers on it and stuff like that. And you heard Mr. Macfield talk about everyone was dressed to the hilt.
That's right.
Dressed up to the hilt. And they had these T-shirts that said, Cool Cat,
yes,
on it, had it emblazoned on the T-shirts, Cool Cat. And they used to play all of the regular music and stuff like that, the new music that came out, and Mr. Santo Christian used to play a lot of merengue up there.
Yes.
So whenever they would say, let's go up to Moringa Town, and that's how it's got its name. So we were talking about that yesterday. Your comments?
That's true, and I think those records came from Venezuela, actually, because at that time they had a Dutch company that was trading between Holland and Venezuela, and they would stop off here and take men on temporary, what do you call, part-time work, part-time seamen, and they would go down, unload the ships down in Venezuela, load them back up again, and then they would let them off here, and then the next voyage pick them up again. And some of those people were from up around Moringa Town, and when they came back, they brought the records, and they were all Moringa records, and they were played there. Mr. Santo played them there. And remember now that at that time, Mr. Santo was one of the first men that had what they call a sound system that could play, and you could hear it all over Georgetown.
Yeah.
And you ought to ask Niels about the time that he had gotten frustrated. He had some domestic thing there, and he used to keep bees on.
Yeah. When they have fights at at the
bar.
the nightclub and the bar, he'd let the bees go.
Let the bees go.
Everyone.
and clear out everybody.
I heard about that.
But copper boilers is very very important in our culture too.
Yes.
Because that is where they used to boil sugar and in the big old copper pots, and they used to and down at copper boilers, I still can, in my mind's eye, see the mills where they used to mill the sugar cane. The old mills where they mill the sugar cane, and then they would boil the sugar and boil the juice and make sugar, and also make rum. They would also distill their own rum.
And there was I heard there was a huge cane plantation in that area.
Yes. And of course, in that area is when we had one of the most important domestic medicine, person of medicine.
Beck.
Beck.
Yeah.
Yeah. Beck, and she used to boil medicine for everybody in the island. And she used to she could sell it by the quart and sell it by the gallon, and people would be lining up there to buy on Beck's medicine. And
Yeah, and I think you told a story too that there was some of those up and coming Caymanians
That's
who didn't
right.
want people to know that
know,
they would
that's
get the
right, they would
medicine
get
from her,
medicine
but they
from
would
her.
they would get it surreptitiously.
and they would send their servants or their
Yeah.
people to buy the medicine and give it to them.
We have a caller who has rejoined us. Let's take that caller. Caller, good morning and welcome back to For the Record.
Yeah, gentlemen, I had to chime back in on that. That's my topic, you know. I remember Bo Weeble back in front in Phoenix, and I used to play guitar with them at Moringa Town. Them days they never had no floor, you know. They had sand. And the time a fight would start, Mr. Saro, he would lock the place, you know, go outside from his bar counter and lock the front door and let the bees out, you know. Let me tell you, you had to find big hole in the sand to get out from underneath it, because them bees were, I don't know what he used to do, because they were the viciousest bees that I know. And I remember one day they were very young, probably was 16, and a fight started one Saturday night. The guys came from West Bay, and then they had, I think it was the McLean's brother and them, and they had a fight there. And Mr. Sado, he come from behind the counter and he said, let me tell you something. I know how to get him out. And he locked that door. I remember they had a wooden window, and I left my guitar there. I never did go back for about 2 or 3 days to that place there. Bees? I don't know where Mr. Sanders used to get them bees from. And then I remember there, right there by my Aunt Joyce, the place there, where Blueberry Hill was. Them days, Fats Domino were really the man of the music there. I found my thrill on Blueberry Hill and all of them. And Begin Little One, they had the speakers too, you know. They used to have the speakers, and they used to bring in all the latest songs from overseas. I remember Lil One would take his bicycle down off the ceiling when he come home. Like you say, see with the flag. Because you know you grew up right there.
Oh, yeah, right there. Yeah, I remember. Let me tell you this little short story, George. I used to go down there, and they used to let me dance and stuff like that. I used to dance down there, and they, you know, of course, in this day and age, they get in trouble for it, but they gave me some liquor and got me drunk, and my sister Annis came down there and took me home, and they gave me one behind, and when I woke up that day, I thought it was the next day. When I woke up that evening, I thought I was into the next day. I'll never forget that.
Yeah, they were good days, man. They were good days.
And they also had another. Musical place in Georgetown, to up Shaden Road, that was called Contra Club.
Oh yes.
Contra Club.
That was Dalmain.
Dalmain
Miles.
Yeah, Contra Club, and he used to play all of the old hit sound in the still of the night.
And then they had one on Mary Street too.
Yeah, the Drifters. You remember the Drifters? They used to have the Drifters and then Mr. Farmer, Bright Spot.
Yeah.
Boy, that was a place.
But
and then they had Matilda Corner too, you know.
Yeah, but before Farmer's Bright Spot, there was also another one that Bulla had. Frank's father.
Oh yes, Top Star.
Top Star. Yeah, that used to be hot and heavy.
We gotta have it. We have to revive that show again. We have to have that show. And George, I want to thank you very much. Thank you very much. You know, for bringing that to our attention. And just one more thing. We have another caller. Okay, we have another caller. I think it's the devil from hell calling. They sound like they have phone lines down there, either that or they got cell phones in hell. Mr. Ivan, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
You're caught the tail end of this topic about Blueberry Hill in them there, so that was my time too. They want to talk about bicycles, but I was one of the first ones from Utmost. We had a car.
What?
And I
You must have been very extremely popular in West Bay then with a car.
Not exactly.
More popular now.
And well, good morning to the panels to start with.
Good
morning.
Morning.
And we used to have parties at the courthouse.
Courthouse?
In the courthouse.
Yeah, I think they used to call them basket parties or something like that.
I don't know what the hell you call them, but the hell of parties. And we could have got killed there because we used to be crowded and that used to be rock, and we now had no sense no that could broke down but wooden building. And then after that we went then Blueberry Hill in Cayman after Moringa Town. They started having a Blueberry Hill. I know all the girls. Some of them left me at New York. Some of them still here. But we used to have some good times there. And I mixed right in with those Georgetowners.
Mm-hmm.
So they all know me from then. And I guess some people come in now, so I got to go to work.
Okay,
So
thank you,
have a
Mr.
blessed
Ivan.
day.
Okay.
Continue to listen when you get a chance. We have another caller. We're going to try to take that caller and fit them in before the 8:30 break. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning. I've been trying to get in because as I've heard you all naming off, the one that was left out was my beloved Top Star.
Yeah, we did mention Top Star. Mr. Markfield mentioned it at the end.
You finally got in. But I want to say, as beloved as Top Star is to me, I don't know much about Top Star. So really, that's the one I would like for you to concentrate on the next time. And to me, why it was so beloved to me, because I saw it, and it might not even be so, but in my mind, it was a woman in commerce, because I always thought that it belonged to Dr. Macfield's mother. And I saw that as a great example, even though I was a little girl, that, a woman could own a club, and operate a club. And to me, it was so beloved. I liked the windows. I think it was made out of masonite. I liked the windows. I liked how it was so close to the barbed wire fence that you could touch the fence. I liked everything about it. And I think a real travesty in Georgetown, and I might be wrong, is that we don't call Maxfield Lane Top Star Lane, because I don't think too many people even remember about Top Star. But, next time I wish you all would really, as they would say nowadays, drill down on that Top Star, the romance and the reminisce of that Top Star there. That was great in my mind. And like I said, I don't know who it really belonged to, but I always saw it as a woman in commerce. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Markfield,
Yeah.
you got 1 minute. You can comment on that. Thank you very much, Ms. Charlene, for that.
Yeah, it was belonged to Onisha
Ms.
Macfield,
Onisha, yeah.
which is one of my uncle's wife and Frank's mother. And you must remember that in those days, those places that had liquor license were very important to us, because that were the first time that the liquor license were being distributed especially in our community, because we grew up here for generations with just only 2 liquor licenses in Cayman.
Captain Ben's Bar
Ben's
and
Bar
Mr.
and
Albert
Albert Smith's Bar.
And then I guess in the other districts they had it. They would have had.
And Moringa Town was probably the 3rd liquor license. And then there was a license that's big called Boy's Place that you could buy alcohol, but that was not a club. And when the club started, then Top Star got a liquor license. That was the 4th place in Georgetown. And then there was Farmers Bryce Bought, and then CN. And then there was the one up near the airport, Marie.
Oh, yes. Palm Grove. Palm Grove Inn, yes.
People to go to Palm Grove. That was so popular. People go to Palm Grove and do they would have New Year's Eve night celebrations there and Christmas Eve night celebrations there. That was the most modern one in the community. Like and don't forget, in those days, you see, there was a lot of interaction between the tourists and the locals. And in fact, a lot of the hotels would have what you call Native Week, Native Night. They would send the tourists from the hotels down to the local places to eat local dishes, and then they would go to the local night spots. And then there's another place, Charlie's became Charlie's.
Yeah.
Charlie Martin's place
Yeah,
became famous, and then Ace Club became famous. So over the hill.
Charlie's eventually turned into Miss Olga. Miss Olga, and
Miss
that's running
Olga.
all,
So
yes.
over the hill, up in the bush, as they used to call it in those days, was very popular.
Yeah, Surrad Bush.
Up in Surrad Bush, they would call it in those days. Up in Surrad Bush, which means South Bush.
Yeah.
But they would call it Surrad Bush. Yeah. And today, that interaction between the people who visit us is all gone now. It's very selfish now. No money, not much money is spent in the local community by the people who come, and the local people are not getting any of the American dollars anymore, and that is past. But I don't know how we're going to be able to bring that back, because not only that, now the societies get more violent too, and people are sort of scared to go to these places now.
We've got to take a break now. Folks, I want to remind you, you're listening to For the Record. I'm your host, Art Connor. My guest in the studio with me this morning, we have Mr. A. Steve McField, prominent local attorney, and Mr. Christopher Saunders, political activist, political pundit, certified public accountant, pretty good domino player. Please stay tuned. We'll be back shortly. Welcome back to For the Record, where I am your host, Art Connor, and my guests in the studio with me this morning are Mr. A. Steve McField and Mr. Christopher Saunders. We're going to soon get back to 2015. Just want to answer one more question that a caller had. They wanted to know how did boilers get its name. And again, in talking to Miss Ardith Smith, she related to me that copper boilers as well as boilers, they were two areas where they used to, to process the cane. What happened during the war, because of the scarcity of metals, they were both dismantled and the metals were sent back to the United Kingdom to help in the war effort in terms of making munitions and armory and everything else. But boilers was also an area where sugarcane was processed, was boiled there as well. Okay, we're going to go now and get into 2015. I know Mr. Saunders wants to talk about the whole issue about population size in the Cayman Islands. But before we go to that, we want to talk about this Supreme Court ruling, Mr. Steve. When the article in the BBC News, and it says that the Supreme Court ruling about Prince Charles's letters to ministers takes freedom of information to the heart of the British state, the most sensitive areas of the relationship between the royal family and the government. Or alternatively, it is all about a peripheral matter which has little to do with how contemporary political decision making happens. That depends on your views of the role of the monarchy in the United Kingdom today. But the Supreme Court's judgment, which implies that advocacy correspondence from Prince Charles to ministers should be made public, will allow all a greater insight to make up their minds on the question of the role of the monarchy in the United Kingdom today. And it goes on to talk about Charles's advocacy. It talks about the fact that in the UK, their freedom of information legislation, ministers have a veto on decisions that are can be made in relation to certain correspondence, and that has now changed that. He says, however, publication of the actual letters may take some weeks because the government is going to go over it and they will redact certain things that may be personal in there, but it is certainly a game changer in the United Kingdom in relation, to this situation that is particularly similar to the whole tempura situation that we have in the Cayman Islands. Because here we have a situation again where it has cost the Cayman Islands government huge sums of money to litigate this whole issue. It cost the Cayman Islands government a whole lot of money when it came to the tempura investigation to begin with. it appears as if the Tempura investigation was something that was initiated by the governor. Whether or not it was initiated on the governor on behalf of the United Kingdom or on behalf of the people of the Cayman Islands, I'm not sure whether that matters. Certainly, if it was on behalf of the Cayman Islands and the people of the Cayman Islands, then the people of the Cayman Islands have the right to know what is in that Tempura report. And they keep using excuses as to why it shouldn't be released. The last one being that there is still investigations and possibly criminal charges that may be brought against Bridger or someone, why it can't be released.
Actually, I want to say something,
Sure, Chris.
OC. You were saying that cost the Cayman Islands government. And I think one of the things where we keep using the word government, people start seeing it as an entity versus we the people. So when I say something has cost the Cayman Islands people, then the Cayman Islands people need to know exactly what it is that they bought and what it is that they paid for.
Mm-hmm.
Barring issues of national security, which no one has screamed at in this place, I think that is something that needs to be looked at seriously. Now, where it is I do have a fundamental problem is the lack of voice from the people who are supposed to be our collective voice. And therein is the issue. I mean, people have been writing blank checks for these issues, and we have yet to know exactly what it is. And for me, like the Eurobank scandal, there are so many issues that the UK government have done. And in fairness, I mean, you got to put things in context. At the end of the day, the governor works for the UK. He's a UK civil servant. And ultimately, just as though we expect the Cayman Islands civil servants to be having the best interests of the Cayman Islands government and the Cayman Islands people at heart, why should we honestly believe that a UK civil servant will do anything but have the UK government at heart? So ultimately, this is about what's in Cayman's best interest and who's actually protecting Cayman's best interest. And the people who are supposed to be protecting Cayman's best interest are once again asleep at the wheel, and therein is the problem. So we have write all of this blank check. We have no idea what it is that we have bought, and whether people want to accept this or not. This entire investigation was done to bring down Cayman financial sector, and that's really what you went at the heart of one of the things of our judiciary. You know what I mean? And no one seems to even be concerned. I mean, what else has to be done for people to realize that we do have forces out there that are hell-bent and destroying our way of life? And, I mean, just listen to what you guys were saying earlier in terms of going back to the good old days. And that was fine. Because back then when we were living in it, we didn't even think it was a good old days because you never could see what we had coming forward to this day.
Yes, yeah, couldn't see
and therein goes the issue is that we have sat down. We have the most people that we have ever had. We have built a country, and we have built it with no plan. We have never sat down and started looking at the infrastructure and institutions that we need to put in place to preserve our heritage, preserve our history, preserve our culture. And then we're complaining now when it has never ever been done, when ultimately that is something that we, the people, should have always been doing over the years. But anyway, I know Mr. Macfield has a more legal thing, but one thing I want to add on that, and it's kind of curious. Correspondence between ministers in the Westminster system are correspondence between people who are representative of other people. So unlike the US, where they have a republic-style system where the president can borrow executive privilege to cover whatever correspondence from during his branch of the government or whatever, in this situation, the question also arises, if someone is writing my representative to do something, at the end of the day, minister or no minister, your representative first, I want to know what my representative is doing. And from that standpoint, then the question is, how can a public business be done in private? So these are all the issues that comes up. But anyway, Mr. Mack, I will.
Yes, you see, and first of all, the Supreme Court replaced the old court, the House of Lords. The House of Lords was the highest court, domestic court in England. The Supreme Court is now the highest domestic court in England, and of course, the Privy Council is the highest court for the Commonwealth, highest appeal court for the Commonwealth. Well, under the British Constitution, the monarch or the heir to the monarchy is supposed to be neutral. And of course, the paper said, the Guardian says, because otherwise would impair their ability to fulfill their monarchical duties if he became king.
Right.
But what he was doing was writing letters to the government ministers to attempt to influence the government policies, and he was doing it. It wasn't by public email or public letter. It was doing privately, underhandedly. Now, some people say that was wrong, and they asked to have at one of the lower courts, probably the Court of Appeal or one of the lower courts, to release those letters, to have them let them see them. The lower court approved the FOI request.
I think it was a tribunal initially.
Yes, tribunal request, and then the government appealed the matter and it went all the way to the Supreme Court, who the judges decided by 5-2 that the government had acted illegally when it vetoed the publication of Charles's ministerial correspondence, and the court said the release, which had previously been approved by the lower court. Now, what in England they named Charles's letters to the Black Spider memos, and it goes to show, you see, that over there people can get justice when it comes to FOI requests, but in the colonies now, where if it affects us directly, we cannot get justice now for the money that we already spent on the double standards of these people.
Now, when we look at Mr. Markfield, they went ahead and they changed their legislation that now makes his correspondence exempt. I think everything except for those on environmental issues or something like that. When we look at what they did there, is it possible in our legislation for legislators to go take a look at our Freedom of Information law to encompass something like the Tempura report, to ensure that our legislation does not make something like that exempt?
Sure, because we still have legislation.
Because we need to look and see how we're going to craft this, because it's going to be a long fight with the United Kingdom, because I believe what is in that report is so damning and implicates, like Chris says, the United Kingdom in terms of what they wanted to do, because it is my personal belief that they were looking to bring the Cayman Islands under administration like they did in the Turks and Caicos Islands. And that will be damning, because you will find that you have a situation where your mother country has gone about the process of undermining the government here in the Cayman Islands.
We certainly could craft legislation to get
that they will have to approve.
But remember, they have to approve.
Yes.
and that's the difference.
Yeah, that's
the difference between us and them.
Yeah.
Because our
Caught between a rock and a hard place.
legislature is a subordinate body. In England, Parliament is supreme.
Yes.
And they can change anything that they want. You might have a court decision, but they can change that court decision by legislation. And so we're in a position where we could do it. We could try to do it, but then we're subject to their representative here, which is the governor. They would probably instruct her not to assent to it, not to sign it.
And we should do that just to have a head-on collision with them. And if they do, then refuse to assent to the legislation, then that again tells us a little bit more. That tells a little bit more.
Hold on, I'm going to say something.
But
hold on, Steve. One thing, and here's what's missing in this equation. When we talk about the UK. The UK government is made up of a group of elected people ultimately. And at the end of the day, some branch of that government still falls under some elected person, some politician. And no politician wants an embarrassment or something. And if we find someone doing something, and we have seen many times where those instances have happened, where people have done something, we need to have a relationship with people in the UK press. Listen, they love gossip. They love tabloids. They love story of excitement. I mean, they follow those police guys down here, catch them on the beach, report back in the UK. Look at all of this. These policemen are in Cayman, having a vacation, all that kind of stuff. I mean, they love that kind of stuff. We need to start going out and embarrassing these people in their home country. If a politician in charge of a certain ministry and the ministry is behaving badly, then we embarrass him. Because at the end of the day, he needs to go to his people in the UK to explain his actions. But we sit down here, we just complain at this level when we need to be fighting them on their field.
We have to go to a break now, folks. I want to remind you that you're listening to For the Record. I'm your host, Stuart Connor, my guest in the studio. With me this morning, Mr. Steve Markfield, Alan Steve Markfield, and Mr. Christopher Saunders. We're discussing the Freedom of Information ruling in the United Kingdom and how it relates to the Cayman Islands and the Tempura situation in the Cayman Islands. Please stay tuned, because we're going to continue that discussion, and we will be having more discussions as well. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record, where we have in the studio with us this morning Mr. Steve Macfield and Mr. Christopher Saunders. We have two callers on the line, so we're going to go directly to those callers now. First caller, good morning and welcome to For the Record, caller.
Good morning, Mr. Wood.
Good morning, Mr. Hurlston. How are you?
Fine, thank you, sir. Good morning to Mr. Maxfield and to Mr. Saunders.
Good morning,
Morning,
Mr.
Nicky.
Huddleston.
It is good to hear you, both of you there again with Mr. Oversee. All this, very good.
Thank you.
Mr. Saunders, I agree with you 100% with what you said a while ago. And Mr. Oversee, what you said about being made to be brought maybe under administrative rule and by the British government. One thing that this tempura whole spectacle does is it really reinforces on the minds of our people, which I've always tried to do, as you know, that we're a crown colony. We are not our own master. It shows you that. It shows you that the British governor here is more powerful than our 18 elected representatives, whether we want to believe it or not.
Exactly, yes, sir.
Because if they can keep from us, which when you have the PSC meetings, all is revealed about whatever expenditure the government does, and it just seems to focus only on bad things. Or the general wants to know where this $8,000 went to give some retired civil servant a little send-off or something. I'm not saying that happened, but this is what I'm saying. But we've spent $14 million, and I think it's still going up, and we cannot tell the people why we spent it. We cannot tell them. We can keep making excuses. It's going for a trial. It was too damaging. It would damage the relationship between the judiciary. I think that was the first excuse, wasn't it, Mr. Maxfield?
Yes.
Yes?
That was the primary excuse.
Well, the thing is this. Speculation, is worse than reality. If you say that is the excuse, that it would damage relationship, it leaves the people to think, well, there must be some terrible corruption in our judiciary. Wouldn't you kind of draw that from that? If you're telling the people you spend $14 million on an investigation, and to give you the results of it would show that cause damage to between the people and the judiciary, would lose respect for them or whatever.
Well, it could be the opposite also.
It could
be false accusations against the judiciary that it would come out with damage, would damage the judiciary's independence and their influence in to give good judgments in the community in which they work.
I understand that too, Mr. Macfield. Yes, it could also, but at least if the people were shown the report, we can't be all thought to be all a bunch of ignoramus, or whatever you pluralize that with, that we couldn't really sift through it and see the truth with the document. It could be translated from the legal verbose into the ordinary language that the everyday man can understand, the layman. But to leave it and keep saying that the people can't learn what this is all about, it just to me shows something very wrong, very wrong.
But Mr. Hartston, we have to blame the people who represent us. We cannot all sit in the legislature. All of us, the whatever 50,000 of us, can't sit in the legislature ourselves. So the democracy is designed in such a way that we have quite a number that represents our interests. And so it is for them to push the political envelope. It is for them to push the political envelope to see that we are represented and to get all this information out to us. In the UK, it was the Guardian newspaper that pushed the envelope and to ask for this information. And although the Attorney General in United Kingdom said that the main purpose to justify to keep in charge this letter sheet was that they would hinder Charles' ability to be a successful monarch. But people are saying that perhaps if that is true, then they should bypass a whole generation and let the crown go to Prince William when the Queen dies. And so you see, we are so insular and so afraid, because we're not being politically polite, we're not pushing the envelope. I remember Mr. Jim Borden and all of those people, Mr. Craddock, and all pushing the envelope. And that is the reasons why we have the same provisions in the Constitution about police, about chief of police, and about the governor's portfolio, about the governor's is in charge of local government, the civil service and police. But Mr. Jim and then push the envelope on those issues also, to force those people to have to speak with them on certain issues. And what Mr. Jim did one time is went down to the Legislative Assembly during budget time and his party only voted, the Unity team voted $1 for the government. And when the government found out that they only had $1 in the budget to work with to pay all the civil servants, to pay their salaries, they quickly rushed down to see Mr. Jim Borden to talk about that impasse. So you have to have people who are strong enough and who will let Cayman be defined who we are, not by our future and not by our past. Unless we get those kind of people, we are going to be these mediocre people who are out on the periphery that people have no respect for.
Caller, I'm going to ask if you can leave us there because we have to go to a time check. And for the headline news, I just want to say that, we are prepared to leak information, to surreptitiously put things, give people things on our own people here in the Cayman Islands. Why can't somebody get a copy of it?
Exactly.
Well, the excuse may be because we don't have our hands on it. It's, in the governor's vault or someplace else. If it was someplace else, a copy of that would be circulating by now anyplace else beside the Cayman Islands. So with those last words, we will go to the headline news, and please stay tuned as we will be back shortly. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. I'm your host, Art Connor. My guests, Mr. A. Steve McPhail and Mr. Christopher Saunders. I believe we have one more caller online, 2 callers now. We're going to take those callers because this is their radio talk show. We start the conversation and we invite them to partake in that conversation as well. First caller, good morning and welcome to For the Record.
Good morning.
Good morning again.
Good morning.
Again.
Nothing wrong with that there.
Speaking about this tempura business, no, I don't tell everybody not spend $3 on the compass yet, because in my entire life, because I could don't see how the news was being skewed long time ago. So in matters of importance, that was never my source of information. So there's plenty that I might know about tempura or should know about tempura that I don't know. But I'm going to ask 2 questions, and with a little verbiage in between. But my first question that I would like to be answered this morning is, it is my belief that an investigation into police corruption was the trigger for tempura, and somebody could please tell me if I'm correct there. And then I have another question.
I think it's possible, correct. And police corruption, they were looking, if you saw who they targeted, it was the Caymanian police officers, the senior Cayman police officers in the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service.
Okay.
Mr. McPhail, would you agree with that?
Yes, and also it involved the question of whether members of the judiciary were giving information to the press also. That is the reason why, that is one of the reasons why one of the judges were arrested. Unlawfully arrested. You remember that?
Yes.
Yes, sir. But my problem is not trying to root out corruption at any level. My problem with tempura is when people say then that it may have been a catalyst for the British government to, secretly take us over and so on and so forth. Well, I realize really, and it's speaking particularly about our finance industry, but I realize really that we are in competition with these countries. And in competition, we as Caymanians, our elected officials, need to get smart. When you're in this is competition in a capitalist society. You are in competition. They're not going to play softball with you. And we start out here all by ourselves, and we should have been making ourselves pretty nice and sometimes, yes, insular, but very, very secure and impenetrable by these forces overseas. We should have understood that we were in competition. In competition, there are tricks. The British are known for their tricks all over the world. Remember one time, the sun didn't set on the British Empire. That was not kept in place by playing nice and playing softball. We should have realized that we had people who had the ability and the knowledge and the wherewithal to conduct business at that level. Let's call them bullies for want of a better word. But looks like we weren't. I don't know. Looks like we are always reacting and never have anything in place. But my point about tempura, like I say, I don't care about the police investigation. If there's corruption, it needs to be weeded out. If the judges need to be weeded out. But my problem with tempura is here we are left with a bill, and the bill might be totally paid off or might be still being paid. But what I don't like with the settlement of a particular gentleman, and I think his name is Carnahan, and I'm not trying to demonize the gentleman, that's not my problem, but I got to name the situations as I find them important to me. My problem is, it appears to me, or I believe, that settlement was a secret settlement, and that is what I don't like about it. Because my grandchildren are going to be paid for that secret settlement, whether that has now been paid in full or as a continuing payment. But my grandchildren are going to pay for that out of their pockets, and they're going to pay for it in another way. They will not have the quality of life with programs that might be offered by the government, like education, so on and so forth. The money's not there because the payouts have to be paid, paid for somehow. So that bill, I would truly like to know how much we have paid for that, and I hope my government are never so innocent ever again to enter into that kind of arrangement where they deny the people of this country who are suffering terribly from a broke government posture, and they deny us the right to know how much it is that we leave on the wayside.
Thank you, caller. We're going to ask you to leave us there. Before we take the other caller, just one observation that she had there. When we look at the Turks and Caicos and what was done there, when they put the Turks and Caicos under administration, one of the things that they did was even though they had some sort of a group running that comprised locals as well, making some of the decisions. I forget what it was called, but the governor took over everything related to financial services.
That's right.
That is exactly, if they brought us under administration, that is exactly what they would do here in the Cayman Islands. There would be no more financial services industry. Why do you think that they keep telling us all of the time that we should look to diversify our economy? Nothing wrong with that, but we should get out of the, look towards other areas rather than the business.
One thing from that caller, when she said, the sun never sets on the British Empire. Well, according to the French, the sun never sets on the British Empire because God don't trust the Englishman in the dark. That's actually the full quote. But going back to the financial services, and one of the fundamental difference between here and Turks is that in Turks, and this is just my understanding from what it is I've read, is that a lot of the people became wealthy through to basically politicians' behavior. Yep. Whereas here, a lot of people are actually self-made millionaires. It wasn't dependent on government giving them basically anything.
But the irony of that was those decisions were made in their executive council that was chaired by the governor.
Yes, and the people that they're looking for that they're worried about. I mean, listen, the size of Cayman financial industry is estimated to be about $4 trillion. And I can tell you, that is a lot of people, a lot of powerful people with a lot of money elsewhere that have these very senators that own these very people in the House of Commons that would donate to the campaigns. They're the very same one that have their money here. And I can tell you one thing, if they really wanted to get this money, they would have come and got it a long time. But they just can't find a way because the people, the apple cart that they will have to upset to get access to that money is just too great. It is beyond their own resources.
Okay, let's grab the caller that's been waiting for a while. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning to you, Osi, and to your panel.
Good morning, Carl. How are you?
Morning, Carl.
Good morning, sir.
I'm grateful for another Friday. Life is celebrated in living. I have to concur with the previous caller and also concur with Chris Saunders, who stated Tempura's objective was another strike at our financial industry. Right after we had Ivan, there were some moves made by our British governor at the time, Mr. Smith, to have our industry controls transferred to London. It was so surreptitious and so very calm and sweet, and there was a pushback because everybody recognized the objective. I have to also concur with Mr. Macfield. We had men of iron in the past who had absolutely no inferiority complex, who ran our country and who understood that we were small people arising out of a multitude of other greater entities, but we also were self-determined, and we were confident that we could make our way in the world. Jim Budden and Norman Panton took action
And Benson
that
Ebanks.
took action that left no doubt that they were intellectual equals, that they were equal human beings, and that their country would not be in the back of the bus. And as such, they were able to, we created our financial industry, we started an airline, unrecognized by our competitors around us until we became too big. Going back to Tempura, I have to disagree with one of the previous callers. I agree with him a lot, but if the what's in the records of Tempura were an embarrassment to the Cayman locals, our local judiciary, and our political heads, it would have been revealed because it would have realized their objective. It is an embarrassment to the Crown because they broke laws, they broke rules which would embarrass them in the world. And that is why they do not want Tempura's records to be revealed. We are part of the British family, but they are treating us as estranged children now because it is convenient to do so. And as somebody said today, it is a capitalist world. They are not playing marbles, they're playing for real. And they have a history of success which is not predicated on principle. It is predicated on whatever means I can use to get that success. That means we have had our rules broken when we had the first banking situation where we eventually went to the European Court of Justice and won them because as a part of, I'm trying to remember the bank, but with succession of activities orchestrated to bring down our financial industry, and the tools that have been used have been illegal, they have been unfair, and they have been wrong, and they have been kept in the dark deliberately because they'll be hugely embarrassing and damaging to the Crown, part of our family, and to Britain in from an international point of view. And as the caller said before, we need to wise up and understand that we're playing with people who play rough.
Carl, we want to thank you for sharing that with us. Sorry, we're going to ask you to leave us there. We have two callers online, and we're going to go to a break at this point in time. After the break, we're going to be taking those two callers, so please stay tuned to For the Record. We will be back shortly. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. Chris, you wanted to comment on Carl's statements?
Yeah, I was first of all glad that Carl called in, but I think one of the things that we need to be careful of, and I mean, my sister, she arrived yesterday from the UK, and I mean, I have a lot of friends that are in the UK, and when we say the UK government, we're also talking about the UK people, and I think it's important to realize that this whole tempura ain't the UK people doing. It's probably 2 or 3 conniving or little politicians or whatever that has gotten up, started this, following some special interest that probably donated to their campaign. So these aren't the actions of a UK government, but normally the actions of a few individuals. And what it is that we need to do, we need to find who those individuals are, because they have a seat. They have an election coming up, and I can guarantee you their political opponent should be the ones that should be chasing for this information and saying, you know what, this person in Labour, because this started under the Labour government when Gordon Brown was Prime Minister, was a real hard-on for the Cayman Islands. We need to go and find out who else was in there with him, if they're still running their seats, and we need to find a UK person run against them and say, you know what, here's some information that you can probably start looking to dig up and embarrass them. Mm-hmm. This is what we need to do.
Don't underestimate the influence that the civil service has in the United Kingdom, especially when it comes to foreign affairs and the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. Those directors of the overseas territories and stuff like that. Remember, the politicians come and go. Civil servants are always there. They, a lot of times, are sometimes more political than the politicians themselves. We even know that in our local government, as well. Let's grab the callers, though. 2 callers. First caller, how many now, Ms. Susan? That means the show will have to go on until 10 o'clock this morning. We have 3 callers online. Let's grab the first caller. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record. Try to be as brief as possible because we're going to run out of time. Otherwise, I'll have to sponsor out of my pocket the last half an hour of the show.
Good morning, O.C.
Good morning. How are you?
Oh, I'm not so painful this morning.
That's good. That's good.
My days are getting so much closer for me to go and have my business done.
That is good to know.
Up east there. Good morning, Mrs. Maxfield, and good morning, Mr. Sanders.
Morning, ma'am.
Listen to me now. I can try to make it brief, but I might find a little bit of stammering in between. So,
Okay.
and give and take with me here.
Sure.
The lady caller. You called her a lady, and I'm going to call her a lady. And you called her by her name, and I'm going to say Lady Charlene. Lady Charlene, if you do not recognize my voice, I am this lady that you always call me auntie, just like how your son do. And you have 7 cents. You do have 6 cents. You have 7. Okay, about tempura. Remember me saying on this show and also on Sterling that there is an individual that always say or have been saying for so long that the UK don't mean us any good, but I say it's England. So we're not going to learn too much more about that tempura, understand, unless it be done like how Mr. Saunders just said. We need, not us, our representatives. And another thing, how long has the Premier been in England now? From last week?
He was there for the House of Lords speech that he was going to give to the Caribbean Council, House of Lords through the Caribbean Council, and I think there were other meetings that he was going to be attending and conducting in the UK as well. I think he comes back this weekend.
Mr. O.C.?
Yes, ma'am. Go right ahead. We're listening.
I was only wondering, I had lost track of how long he have been there. But the thing about it is, I wonder what he up to talking about because we're not hearing nothing yet, right?
There have been press releases in relation to what took place at the House of Lords, yes.
Listen to me, OC, you mean it's been coming over on the TV or what?
Well, the press release have been issued, whether or not the media outlets choose to circulate them, but the press releases have been issued. Can you have another point?
I kind of missed something right there.
Okay.
I want to go back a little bit.
Real quickly, got about 30 seconds left.
Yeah, we are dealing now with 2015, but I want to go back a little bit about the licensing for the alcohol. And I forgot about Graham Thompson at the old
Airport.
launched at the old airport.
Yeah, but Captain Ben's bar and Mr. Albert Smith's bars predate that by many years.
Oh, see?
I
worked there.
Okay.
And I worked also the palm groving. I ran palm groving 5 different times.
Okay.
You know what I was saying?
Great. Okay. We're going to ask you to leave us there because we're going to try. We have 8 minutes left to fill in 2 more calls. Thanks for the call. Next caller. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Yes, good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning. How are you, Mr. Orrit?
Hello?
Yeah, good morning. How are you? Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning. Hello, good morning.
Yes, sir. Go right ahead. We're hearing you.
No, good morning again, gentlemen. I don't like a back and forth thing, but what I said about the speculation, and the judiciary is not infallible. Our judiciary is not. They can make mistakes, and they can make serious ones. And when I keep saying this, I don't think of the British government as being our mother and we are children. I don't look at it that way. I look at it the cool, clinical way. They're the colonial power, and we are a colony. It's a different relationship with family and closeness. We're not. We're 5,000 miles away. We're totally different people. It's just that we're a British colony. That's all, the British colony. But until that is revealed, they would never have sent down some senior, very well qualified man to do some investigation just because they want to press something against us or some issue. I don't think so. I think there's something real in it, and until it is, the speculation can be over with when it's revealed, and I'm sure there are at least 5, 6, maybe 10 people here who have seen that report, including the governor, maybe the commissioner of police, maybe the attorney general.
Senior Caymanian civil servants as well. If they want to be heroes, they could tell us what's in it.
But we need our 18 elected representatives, Mr. Maxfield said, to get up and demand it. At least if they're turned down, then we will really see the true relationship as a colony. If they go and demand it, whilst they're off the break between meetings, they could easily all get up and go to Great Britain and say, we demand that you reveal this thing to us, our people.
I agree.
Gentlemen, have an excellent day.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much. Yes, I think there's some senior civil servants who probably had their were able to see that as well. Remember now, they can't lose their pensions now. We're not under the old colonial regime where, if you did something, they could deny you a pension. They can't deny you of that, as well. If you could be a hero by telling us what's in it. One more caller. Let's grab that caller very quickly. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Yes, good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, well, England has just signed up to be a member of the Chinese World Bank, along with 21 other countries. It has been a great concern of the United States, of England, signing up with the Chinese World Bank, and Australia has rejected from being a member. And we have been told from the newspaper a few weeks or probably almost a couple of months now that the richest gentleman from China, that $32 billion, is supposed to be moving his headquarters to Grand Cayman. You all know exactly what is his mean business. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We want to few minutes to wrap up. I just want to read a few text messages and WhatsApp messages that we got from some of our listeners. It says, good morning, hosts and guests. Blessings and guidance from God. Truly another great program. And the incorporation of history, names of places, bars, etc. with humor makes your weekend start off right. Keep the good, fantastic, historical, patriotic, with a bit of humor program coming. It is certainly appreciated, welcomed, and loved. Please. And then it says that they wanted to ask Mr. Macfield. He says, question for Mr. Macfield. He said the press in England brought helped bring light in some issues of concern to the people. So since they received help from the Guardian Press, so are we could we kindly expect some sort of help from our press here to help us bring some issues to enlighten us? Well, it depends on which ones you're talking about. There are some who are hell bent on bringing Cayman down and demonizing Caymanians and degrading Caymanians. So it depends on which one of those presses that you're talking about, my good friend who has sent me that text. And then we have another one that says, morning, Mr. Orsi. I thank you for allowing the wider public the opportunity to listen on Friday to your exceptional two guests, who I consider our full rig shore footage Caymanian. Just to let you know, shore footed Caymanian is a Caymanian who grew up or who has grown up running up and down on the iron shore barefoot. I would like to say thanks to Mr. Chris Saunders for being instrumental in rattling the gasoline companies in bringing the price down, which is being echoed by my friends from the district of Bordentown and eastward. Mr. Saunders, you are bullish. Mr. Steve, thanks for all you have done to enlighten me through the years. And this is, I'm not going to call the name, but he is a political field coordinator and advocate in the Rockhole area. Next week we will tell you who, we will give you his name. So gentlemen, we have 30 seconds each to wrap up.
Well, I know that you were going to ask that, so I tried to write down what I have to say. Well, see, I always try to listen carefully to understand what people are telling me. And generally, there's an anger and a distemper in this country. At the heart of that anger is precisely the conviction that when the Cayman national interest is defined, the Caymanian is not taken seriously. The changes in Cayman are far deeper than our traditional systems or assumptions can comprehend. And the problem we have mostly is exclusion. Exclusion is always an issue in a democracy, but it matters more when we think that those interests we hold as most important to us will suffer as a consequence. Caymanians want change, but they also want unity.
Thank you, Mr. Macphail. Mr. Saunders.
Mine actually was just going to be quite simple.
Sure-footed Caymanians.
Yep. I think it's and I thank the person who sent a message in for the kind comments. But ultimately, I think what it is that we as a people need to recognize is that there's nothing that we can't do. I mean, every time I remember that poem that Mandela read at his inauguration, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. We have too many people that have come here and kind of convinced us that we're no longer invincible to some extent. And I think the Caymanian people needs to be reminded, and we need people to remind them that we are invincible. Because after all, we were born to manifest the glory of God, every single one of us. And rather than sit down and try to find blame in terms of what it is that we can't do or we don't have, sometimes we need to be thankful for what we can do and what we do have. And I think that's kind of the focus we need. We need to get some unity back in the country. We have too many people that's polarized and dividing Caymanians between generation, paper Cayman, rich Cayman, all that kind of stuff. And at the end of the day, whether we arrive by plane or plane, we're all in the same boat now, and we all need to be paddling together. And that's the message we would want to leave everybody with for this weekend.
Gentlemen, I want to thank you very much. We also want to thank you, our listening audience, for allowing us into your homes, into your automobiles, and into your places of work. We also want to thank LED Lighting, Engineering, and Design, our main sponsor here on For the Record. They're located on Dorsey Drive in Industrial Park, where they have great products that will help you to save energy, thus put more money in your pocket for your discretionary spending if you need that as well. And I say to you that we are our brothers and our sisters' keepers. There is always someone out there who's less fortunate than we are, and I ask you to extend a helping hand to them. If you can't do that, then you should donate to a worthy charity. I also say to you that we should consider those, not those who want, but those who need, because there are also many of those in our society as well. I ask you to continue to listen to Radio Cayman. In particular, today, you want to join Sterling Dwayne Ebanks at 12 noon for talk today. Radio Cayman is your radio station, paid for by you, the people of the Cayman Islands. Not the government of the Cayman Islands, the people of the Cayman Islands. So continue to listen to your radio station and participate. I want to say thank you again to Miss Susan for being such a great director on the show. And I must say that today I got through the whole show without clicking my pen because I made sure it wasn't in my hand. Again, folks, have a great day. It has been an enjoyable time talking with you, conversing with you, sharing our stories with you, sharing our history with you. Have a great weekend, and God bless.
Informative, impartial, insightful.
This is your talk show.
1-800-534-8255. Your calls, your input. This is For the Record.